London is experiencing its worst social unrest in almost 2 decades. At least one person has died and over 500 have been arrested following 3 nights of rioting. And we've all seen the images: burning cars, widespread looting, standoffs between crowds and the police. It's hard to believe that these images are coming from the capital city of one of the world's richest countries. Well, there are also reports of troubles in other cities, including Birmingham, Liverpool and Bristol, and all of this fueling fears that the unrest could go nationwide. Well, today, understandably, there's been fervent speculation in the British press about what's to blame for this extraordinary outburst in some of the UK's poorest boroughs. Prime Minister David Cameron was unequivocal about what he thinks.
And I have this very clear message to those people who are responsible for this wrongdoing and criminality. You will feel the full force of the law. And if you are old enough to commit these crimes, you are old enough to face the punishments. And to these people, I would say this: you are not only wrecking the lives of others, you're not only wrecking your own communities, you are potentially wrecking your own life too.
Stern warning then from the British Prime Minister, who was forced to cut his holidays short and come back to London and recall Parliament from its summer recess as well. Well, my guest tonight to discuss the issue, on the phone from Hackney in London, one of the boroughs hit by the unrest, is Claude Moraes. He's the Labour member of the European Parliament for London. Here in the studio with me is Robin Baker. He's a member of Britain's ruling Conservative Party and the president of British Conservatives in Paris. In London, Tony Travers is a professor in the Department of Government at the London School of Economics. And also here in the studio with us is France 24's very own digital media editor, Eric Olander. Thanks to you all very much indeed for being with us tonight. Robin, I'd like to start with you, if I may. The overriding sentiment or reaction, if you like, to the events of the last 3 nights have been that this is terrible, this is shocking, but what it isn't is unexpected.
I wouldn't totally agree with the last point that you have made. It is certainly terrible and shocking. I personally had not expected anything like that, the events that have actually happened. And of course, they have come from an incident that is still being investigated, a very unfortunate incident, and an incident in which we still do not know the full story.
And you're talking, of course, about the shooting
of Mr. Duggan.
Mark Duggan.
Yes.
In Tottenham last week.
Correct. But I think there's one key priority and then a number of things that can happen afterwards. The key priority is that this must be stopped, because the damage that is being done to individuals who have lost their businesses, who have lost their homes, is appalling. People have been in dreadful fear in the streets of London and possibly elsewhere in Britain. So above all, it must be stopped. And I'm very relieved that there are going to be 16,000 police officers on the streets of London tonight, as opposed to 6,000 the previous night.
Claude Moraes of the opposition Labour Party in London. Is this organised criminal gangs, or are these people who don't otherwise have a voice in society making themselves heard?
Well, it's certainly organised crime in that sense. I was trapped in my own house yesterday at the beginning of the riot. We were pinned down until this morning. We couldn't go out because we were near Clarence Road, which was the kind of epicentre of the violence yesterday. And I actually spoke to some people who were caught up in the violence today to kind of get a handle on what is actually happening, because I think the newspaper analysts have found it very difficult to figure out what's going on. And I think that, David Cameron is right to say that this is criminality on a very big scale. He's right to say that people need to be punished and it needs to be stopped. But all of that is absolutely correct. Beyond that, people have found it very difficult to explain what's going on. And it's not at the moment a good atmosphere to really go into those explanations. Even The Guardian, which has really led the best coverage, The Guardian newspaper in the UK, in its leader today, found it very difficult to find one or two definite causes. What I would suggest is that what is happening here is that you have communities here who are gradually getting poorer and poorer. Their parents are gradually getting poorer and poorer. The people who were rioting yesterday that I saw from my window belong to an estate called the Pembury Estate in London. And what is happening there is that people are getting poorer and poorer, while many people in London are getting richer and richer. And what is happening is that a criminality, a sort of gang-style culture is building, where they're seeing goods in the shops that they can't buy, they want it, and they pursue criminality to get it. And they use the cover of riots to loot many shops and to ruin many people's lives. And I think the incident in Tottenham, which was the incident of the shooting, was really not the wider cause. That was the instigator of the violence initially. Later on, new technology was being used, mobile phones, BlackBerry messaging, and I think generationally, politicians, the police, analysts over the age of 30 or 40 really don't understand how this is organised and how quickly you can move people to areas where they know the police will not be present.
Right.
This is a new and unique kind of rioting, which is very worrying.
All right, and that's right, isn't it, Eric Olander? That's exactly what's been happening, and BlackBerry is a name that's been talked about a lot today.
Well, it's BlackBerry, it's social media, and I think an excellent point was made is that the people over 30, if you will, the old people, are struggling to understand how to deal with this. So the debate that's been going on today has been focused on BlackBerry in specific, and there's a member of Parliament by the name of David Lammy, and if we look on the computer here, we can see that he's been tweeting all day for the immediate cessation and cutting of the BlackBerry Messenger service. He writes today, immediate action needed. Londoners cannot have another evening like last night or tonight. BBM clearly helping rioters outfox police, suspended. So he's calling for the suspension of a mobile phone service. Now, this is very similar to what we saw in North Africa, where, of course, Mubarak and Ben Ali also called for the suspension and actually enacted suspensions of their mobile phone systems in order for the police and authorities to gain the upper hand. It is a very fast-moving situation, but one of the commonalities that's tying all of the different rioters together, we don't know their race, we don't know their class, we don't know a lot of these things, is, of course, their use of new technology.
And Claude Moraes, I'd just like to pick up on one point you made as well. If these people, as you say, are getting poorer and poorer, how can they afford BlackBerries?
Well, I mean, that's the point that was made to me today, because it's very easy to just point at all of these people and just say it's all criminality. And indeed it is absolute criminality. People's lives in my area have been ruined. Shops have been burned. People's lives and livelihoods have gone. That's why it's very difficult to explain beyond sheer criminality the other things that are happening.
All right.
One of the things that's happening, which all of us in the studio really find it hard to understand, and I find it hard to understand, but it is happening, is that in a rich city like London, there are people who may appear to be well off because they wear nice training shoes or whatever, but their parents are unemployed. They are often unemployed. The younger people are watching their parents have their benefits cut, and they are very angry. They're angry people. Nothing justifies what they're doing, but they are angry, and of course that anger will be ignored by most politicians.
Let's bring in Claude.
Ignored.
If I could just stop you there. Let's bring in Tony Travis. We haven't heard from him yet. Professor at the London School of Economics. Is this about inequality? Is this people who can't afford things simply saying to themselves, "Well, I'm never going to afford that, so I'm just simply going to take it"?
I think it's too early to judge whether it's a matter of one thing or another. I mean, there'll be a lot of rapid attempts to understand what's gone on here, and that's fully understandable. It is a shocking and unusual thing for a developed city to have to put up with this kind of civil disorder. So I don't disagree that it'll be necessary to work out how this all started. I mean, what you can say is that the reaction has been so widespread and so profound. It's not something that's just happened this week, this month, or indeed this year. It's evidence of something that was there and has built up and has now become visible. So we need, I think, when the rioting has stopped, there'll have to be a judicial inquiry, some kind of inquiry of the kind there was after the disturbances in Brixton back in the 1980s. And we need to understand what the problems were. Otherwise, any policy solutions will simply be random.
Robin Baker, Have Conservative Party policies contributed to this in terms of people feeling poorer? For example, the policy to cancel the education maintenance allowance, which saw a lot of young people lose cash that they had in their pockets.
Well, of course, that policy to cancel that allowance, it hasn't just been cancelled. It has been replaced by an alternative system. But some people will, of course, be worse off. I think the call will be to look for the causes of this, and this has got to be given a great deal of consideration, so I'm speaking perhaps far too early in the process, but I think we've got to look over a much longer period. And let me particularly pick out two possibilities. One has been the change in our education system over a very large number of years. When I was at school, I was taught values. It is unthinkable today that a school should try to teach people values, or in many of them. I was a governor of a comprehensive school when I last lived in England, and there we did try, under the excellent head teacher, the staff tried to incult a respect for excellence among the pupils, and he largely succeeded. But for much of the educational system, the concept that you should teach people values is abhorrent.
What kind of values?
The values of respect for authority, of respect for other people, of concern for other people, that type of thing, it seems to me that we are lacking, and that, I believe, has probably been a significant contributor to what we have seen today.
All right.
The other one, which is, of course, under attack by the new Conservative government, and particularly by the policies being introduced by Ian Duncan Smith, is to combat the dependency culture. If we look at the London borough of Haringey, the level of unemployment is appalling. I read on the internet today that it was 51%. I don't know if that figure is accurate.
In some areas, and it's particularly young people who are affected, it's
Exactly.
20%. It's twice the national average, for example, in
Exactly.
Tottenham.
And
1 in 4
Haringey,
people
of course,
unemployed.
is a very young borough. There's a
But what is the Conservative Party doing to help those people and create jobs rather than just cutting off their welfare payments?
What the Conservative Party is doing is trying to dispel the concept of the dependency culture, whereas families are completely used to nobody in that family working. And this is a very difficult thing to fight against. We're waiting to hear what George Osborne is going to say at the end of the summer about the growth strategy in England. It's difficult to do that when the Conservative Party has inherited an enormous deficit problem, and the deficit problem, above all, must be solved. We've seen what has happened in Greece and Italy and even in the United States, so that sadly has to take a priority. But the restructuring of the welfare system to persuade people that they must work because there's tremendous benefit in working for themselves.
But only if there's jobs to do.
If there are jobs to do, and these jobs have got to be created, and that's something we're waiting to hear from. But it's not just if there are jobs to do. A great number of jobs in the United Kingdom are being filled by people who come in specifically to fill these jobs, because the British cannot be found to do them. And it's an immensely complex problem. I hope that I'm not going to be seen as trying to simplify it, but I think these two aspects, ending the dependency culture and the acceptance that people will never work, and reviewing the question of values taught by our educational system, is something that I hope the government will look at.
OK, you raised some interesting points there. We're going to lose Tony Travis shortly, so I just want to hear from him your reaction to what we've just heard from Robin Baker.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very complex issue. The way inner cities operate in London, other British cities, Paris, other French cities, is a very complex business. It's the way people live together. We've got things here about public services, how society has changed over time, how attitudes to authority have changed over time. And all I'll say is, there's a piece of analysis, these things are changes that have gone over a very long period, and they're not going to be fixed quickly. And I think what will be needed in the short term is there'll have to be government support for the rebuilding of some of the areas concerned, but then there will have to be a serious look by local and national politicians at the way in which public services, and particularly the way in which young people are treated by public services, how that affects them and how that brings them into society. Now, these are, as I say, it'll have to be done sensitively, but it also has to be done with a sense of what is right and wrong. And in a sense, all the speakers have said that tonight. But I do think one of your early speakers made a serious point in relation to, well, they've all made serious points, but in relation to the new media, the sort of over 30, under 30 point. And with a lot of these issues, and it's true in many countries, the people who make laws, the people who run the country, are generally significantly older, inevitably, than those at whom some of their policies are aimed. Now, that's no excuse for bad behaviour, no excuse for criminality, but there is a question to be asked here about, in a sense, how people who are disaffected, and they're not all under 30, by the way, how people are disaffected can be brought back towards the core of democratic politics and feeling they have a stake in society. And I think all of that will need to be looked at. This is a systemic shock to the British political system.
Right, and that's one thing that these social networking sites have done, it could be argued. They have brought people back into politics, certainly in the Arab world. Anyway.
Well, they've given people a voice, and I think one of the differences from when Mr. Baker was growing up and what it is today is that the time factor is very different, because it will take years to solve these problems, but the voice that people have now to express themselves and the tools that they have to express themselves happen in real time. So there is a contradiction that exists there, because if people aren't happy, they're organizing, they're expressing themselves, and they're creating stories that really tell the entire world and allows for organization and allows for protest movements like this to form, whether it's in London or in Cairo.
And there's images as well. We're seeing pictures very, very quickly, pictures that we wouldn't have seen before when perhaps the establishment, if you like, was choosing what we could see.
The volume of pictures and video and text from Twitter is simply overwhelming. And this is, again, another problem for authorities in how to deal with this, again, which we've seen these instincts that come up to shut the systems down. That ultimately will not solve the problems. What solves the problems is the underlying solutions that come to, housing and jobs and whatnot. Shutting down the communication networks did not work in Cairo, it did not work in Tunis, it will not work in London.
All right, OK, we're going to have to take a brief pause here. When we come back, we will have the international headlines for you and the second part of tonight's debate.